Hello guys, Croft is here. This video is part 2 of the Complete Engineer lore compilation. In this episode, we'll delve into explanations, theories, and analyses related to engineers in Alien Covenant. We'll explore why David destroyed the engineers on Planet 4 and figure out whether these beings were actually engineers. In addition, we'll discuss if Walter is still alive and examine the deleted scenes that reveal Elizabeth Shaw's death. On top of that, we'll take a closer look at the engineer city that was deleted from the movie, how David created the xenomorphs, and other interesting topics.
Sometimes to create, one must first destroy.
Hello guys, Croft is here. One of the most confusing aspects of Alien Covenant was David's act of killing the engineers. This action isn't explained in the film, making it one of the biggest mysteries about the movie. And what could be better than getting the answer from the creator of the Alien franchise, Ridley Scott himself, who talked about this specific topic on a podcast. In the Alien Covenant prologue, which is not included in the movie, David says that he learned the engineer ways.
I learned of their ways.
And one of these ways is that they wipe the slate clean when their creations don't follow the desired path. Because David has a superiority complex and aspires to be a god himself, he destroys the engineer planet to imitate the engineers, but his real motives are more complicated than that. Since the last time I discussed this topic, I have uncovered more information about David and his twisted psychology, so in this video we'll delve deeply into the reasons behind David's decision to annihilate the engineers. In addition to Ridley Scott pretty much giving the precise answer to this question, we'll analyze David's extended explanation in the early script and the Ozymandias poem he recites while destroying the engineer colony. So what are the engineer ways? Ridley Scott described the engineers as the gardeners of space. They cultivate various life forms on different planets, including humanity on Earth, the beings on the Planet 4, and potentially many others. However, if their creations stray from the intended path that the engineers have set, they wipe the slate clean. And here's the direct quote from Ridley Scott. If the planet went wrong, they, engineers, would want to wipe it clean, but that could take 500 years. When they revisit, because different visitors would come back and see that we're not doing so well, they would look at these human beings that are jerks, that are killing the planet, killing themselves, not able to settle down. They're like a bunch of children, we should wipe it clean. This idea is borrowed from the Bible and other ancient Sumerian texts where, when humanity strayed from the righteous path, God or gods orchestrated various catastrophes such as the Great Flood to reset the human civilization. In the Alien universe, these gods are depicted as beings from flesh and blood, the engineers. So Ridley Scott strongly implies that engineers are responsible for the Great Flood and other cataclysmic events that decimated human populations in ancient times. As depicted in Prometheus, the engineers prepared a ship loaded with a deadly pathogen intended for Earth. The movie mentions that the ship was ready to leave LV-223 approximately 2,000 years ago, coinciding with the time of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It appears that the movie integrates various events and religious texts into its timeline, even suggesting that Jesus was sent by the engineers. As mentioned in one of the early scripts, Jesus was taken to the engineer homeworld and then sent back to Earth with the mission of guiding humanity back to the righteous path. Ridley Scott also confirmed that this idea was explored in early scripts. According to many ancient texts, small groups of humans survived after various catastrophes. But because humans crucified Jesus, the engineers decided to enact a harsher penalty, planning to unleash the pathogen to exterminate all forms of animal life on Earth, leaving no survivors. So David, having studied the engineer ways, essentially the behavior and ethos of gods, wants to become a god himself to fulfill his once forbidden desire for creation. Therefore, David does the same thing to engineers as what they wanted to do to humans and proceeds to destroy the engineer colony on Planet 4. And there's actually a specific reason David has a god complex. David was created in the image of Peter Weyland, a greedy and cold-blooded billionaire. As a result, David inherited similar psychopathic characteristics, which were further exacerbated by the unfair treatment he received from others. David also inherited a sense of superiority or a god complex from Peter Wayland. In a Prometheus deleted scene, Wayland tells the engineer that we are gods, implying that he's a god just like them.
We are gods.
This scene makes it clear that Wayland possessed a god complex, a trait that was likely passed on to David as he was created in Wayland's image. In Alien Covenant, David almost says that he is God, implying that he's a new visionary.
And are you that next visionary? I'm glad you said it.
But according to Ridley Scott, David's motivations are even deeper than a mere desire for godlike power. David harbors a pure, intense hatred for both humanity and the engineers collectively, and it's not that difficult to understand why. In the Alien Covenant early draft script, there is the extended conversation between Walter and David, where David says, "Mankind was such a disappointment, ruled by superstition and avarice, despoiling the planet and ourselves in equal measure. No dignity, no exaltation, bloody animals in the mud, and no more." Furthermore, David has a very personal reason to despise the engineers, as one of them literally tore his head off. Due to David's initial programming, he wasn't allowed to create, but this boundary was removed after Wayland's death. So now David harbors a strong desire to fulfill himself as a creator, particularly as a creator of new life forms, a role reserved for gods only. Therefore, fueled by the deep hatred for engineers and humans, David destroys the engineer colony to create a clean slate for his bioexperiments in order to fulfill his godlike aspirations. The second reason David annihilated the engineers, which is somewhat linked to the first, is explained by David himself in the movie. While talking with Walter, David says, "They are a dying species, grasping for resurrection, so they are leaving the earth forever, but their power is an illusion. They don't deserve to start again, and I'm not going to let them." This statement can be interpreted in two ways. The first interpretation is that David is referring to humans and the Covenant crew attempting to leave Earth and colonize other planets. David, harboring a deep resentment towards humanity, is determined to prevent them from achieving their fresh start. He firmly believes that humans do not deserve a second chance to start again. However, the same quote could also be interpreted towards the engineers. Instead of colonizing planets, the engineers seed them with life forms created in their image and periodically visit them, as Ridley Scott said. The reason David might be referring to the engineers is because of the word forever in the quote, "They are leaving the earth forever." This could be referencing the idea that the engineers, conceptualized as gods, have stopped their once frequent visits to Earth. Both the Christian and the Hebrew Bibles mention mysterious giant beings called the Nephilims who were present on Earth before and after the flood. This narrative has parallels with the group of deities called the Anunnaki in the Sumerian tablets. However, in the last 5,000 years or so, there is no evidence that these beings have been present on Earth, indicating a stoppage of their visits. This absence of gods on Earth could be what David is referencing when he says they want to leave Earth forever and I'm not going to let them, which is the reason he tries to annihilate the engineer planet. The third key aspect of understanding David's intentions is the poem that he recites. "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." We will not delve into the entire poem here as it's quite lengthy. However, in a nutshell, the poem is the depiction of a statue of the great king Ozymandias standing alone in the vast desert. Inscribed on the statue is a message glorifying King Ozymandias and monumental achievements of his empire. This imposing statue was constructed during a time when his kingdom was extraordinarily powerful. Yet now, the statue stands alone in isolation in the middle of the desert, symbolizing that Ozymandias' once great empire has declined and now has been entirely forgotten. So according to the poem, time eventually reduces everything to oblivion, leaving even the mightiest kings and their empires to be forgotten. By reciting this poem while destroying the engineers, David seems to be drawing a parallel between the engineers' civilization and that of Ozymandias. Despite the engineers' former glory and remarkable achievements acting as gods who created life on Earth, their civilization too is about to be perished and to become lost in the sands of time, much like that of Ozymandias. So these are the major reasons David annihilated the engineer planet. Essentially, David acted as a furious god trying to imitate the engineers to fulfill his once restricted desire for creation. Thank you guys for watching, like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more alien content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video. Hello guys, Croft is here. Today we'll finally answer the question of whether the humanoid beings on Planet 4 are engineers or not. The inhabitants of Planet 4 have been the subject of debate for years, however, Ridley Scott seems to have finally explained who they are. In one rare interview that took me a while to find, Ridley Scott said that he views engineers as gardeners of space. He also said that in the next movie there will be at least 4 different players who will come in to investigate, and one of which will be the engineers arriving to find the planet decimated by David.
There will be 3 or 4 different players coming in to investigate, one of which will be the engineers arriving back to find that planet decimated.
This implies that the inhabitants of Planet 4 are not the original engineers, but rather a colony just like Earth created by the actual engineers. In this interview, Ridley Scott confirmed that engineers are not all dead, and although he didn't exactly say that Planet 4 is a colony, after examining all the evidence and various clues, I found a concrete and definitive answer about who these beings are and how they relate to the engineers at the beginning of Prometheus and the last engineer on LV-223. So could these humanoids on Planet 4 be the original engineers? One theory suggests that the reason these beings appear more primitive compared to the engineers in Prometheus is that their society has regressed, causing them to forget the advanced technology that they once had. The engineer on LV-223 was in cryosleep for 2000 years, so it's possible that during that time other engineers on their home planet lost all their technology. This might have occurred because the outbreak on LV-223 wiped out all the scientists in the engineer society. So this theory suggests that the beings on Planet 4 are engineers, but their civilization has dramatically regressed, much like what occurred in Europe following the fall of Rome during the Dark Ages. While this theory seems plausible, it is not accurate. Numerous clues indicate that the beings on Planet 4 are not engineers, and the planet itself is not the engineer homeworld, so let's go over the evidence. At the end of Prometheus, David mentions that the engineer comes from a planet referred to as Paradise in many ancient Earth cultures.
Several of your ancient cultures had a word similar to it. Paradise.
Then Prometheus concluded with David and Shaw setting out for the engineer's Paradise planet, a journey which became a highly anticipated aspect of Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant was initially promoted with emphasis on David and Shaw reaching the engineer homeworld, and given the fact that the initial title for the movie was Paradise Lost, many believe that these humanoid beings on Planet 4 are engineers. However, they're not, and let's explore the reasons why. The primary similarity between Planet 4 inhabitants and the engineers is their pale white skin and complete lack of hair. But this is where their similarities end, and in fact they exhibit many more differences. The eyes of the original engineers are entirely pitch black, but upon closer inspection, the beings on Planet 4 have human-like eyes. They are also much shorter than the engineers in Prometheus. In the scene where David traverses the Colosseum, we observe the bodies of Planet 4 inhabitants. They are quite short, possibly even shorter than humans. This sharply contrasts with the towering height of the engineers, who stand at least 8 feet tall, further implying that the inhabitants of Planet 4 differ significantly from the original engineers. In addition, the beings on Planet 4 appear to be technologically inferior compared to the engineers in Prometheus. They dress in simple robes looking like peasants, a stark deviation from the technologically advanced appearance and proficiency with machinery exhibited by the engineers in Prometheus. On top of that, a deleted scene from Alien Covenant shows that other Juggernaut ships were stored beneath the docking platform on Planet 4. So although the residents of Planet 4 had access to Juggernauts, they seemed unfamiliar with their functions and lack any knowledge on how to pilot them. Another point of evidence is that the design of the city appears ancient, with the Juggernaut docking station standing out due to its different design, hinting that it might not be native to the planet. The city's architecture resembles Roman style, featuring a grand stadium and relatively simple buildings. These structures lack the Geiger-style designs consistently present in Juggernauts and Xenomorph artworks. So by comparing the docking station to the rest of the city, the architectural disparity between the engineers' structures and those on Planet 4 becomes especially evident. All this evidence points towards the likelihood that the beings on Planet 4 are a colony that the engineers created and used to frequently visit. The joyful reception of David's Juggernaut suggests that they might have been waiting for the return of their celestial creators, the engineers, for quite some time. However, another theory seems to challenge this straightforward conclusion. The inhabitants of Planet 4 wear robes reminiscent of those worn by the engineers at the beginning of Prometheus, hinting that they might belong to the same group. Since we don't have a clear reference to determine the height of the engineers from the deleted opening scene in Prometheus, this theory proposes that they might have been shorter than the last engineer on LV-223, being similar in height to both humans and beings on Planet 4. This idea introduces the possibility of distinct engineer factions. One faction might be more religiously inclined, dressing in robes and building stone cities like the one in Alien Covenant. In contrast, the group on LV-223 might be a scientific faction, driven by a quest to unlock the secrets of the universe through science and biotechnology, even enhancing their height with genetic engineering. However, this theory is also incorrect. The engineers in the deleted opening scene of Prometheus are not the same as those on Planet 4, and there are multiple clues to support this. The sacrificial engineer had pitch black eyes, which is a notable contrast to the beings on Planet 4. Furthermore, even if this particular engineer was genetically designed to be perfect with pitch black eyes, all the other engineers in the scene also possessed completely black eyes. Additionally, the sacrificial engineer lacked nipples, while the beings on Planet 4 clearly had them, as can be observed from the sketches made by David. It's also worth noting that the group of engineers in Prometheus did not include any females, which is consistent with the hologram on LV-223. However, female figures are distinctly visible on Planet 4. All these clues strongly suggest that the inhabitants of Planet 4 are different from all engineers we encountered in Prometheus, leading us to believe that they are likely a colony similar to Earth created by the actual engineers. Prometheus strongly hinted that David and Shaw would arrive to the true engineer homeworld. However, due to significant critique of the movie upon its release, Alien Covenant chose a different path, postponing the visit to the Paradise Planet for future films. After Alien Covenant was released, Ridley Scott mentioned that in the upcoming movie, David would go to the planet, strongly suggesting that after having created this deadly organism, David would now target the actual engineer homeworld. It's uncertain if this movie will ever be made, as the studio now seems to be exploring a new direction with Alien Romulus. Nevertheless, Ridley Scott might revisit David's storyline in the future, especially if Romulus proves to be successful. Thank you guys for watching, like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more Alien content. My name is Croft, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, Croftus here. Today I'm gonna talk about my fellow android, Walter. In Alien Covenant, there is a fight between two synthetics after which David impersonates Walter and deceives Tennessee and Daniels. There are a few unanswered questions whether or not David killed Walter and how exactly David assumed Walter's identity. There are two main theories on this. David simply removed his hand and changed clothes, or maybe David downloaded his consciousness into Walter's body. Although both of these theories may be plausible, there are a few blatant clues in the movie that make only one of these two logically possible. In this video I'm going to talk about how David impersonated Walter and if Walter is still alive, which may be possible given some details about Alien Awakening. Before we discuss if Walter is dead, let's figure out how David assumed his identity. We know that David possesses a level of strength above humans, so it wouldn't be hard for him to remove his hand and get in Walter's clothes. His hand appeared melted, which wouldn't be easy to do with a knife that David probably used to stab Walter. However, there was a dead neomorph nearby and David could have used alien blood to melt off his hand. It doesn't seem that David would have enough time to do it, but in the original script of the film before boarding the cargo ship, Daniels and Loeb spent quite a bit of time fighting the second neomorph and this scene wasn't included in the film. So with this fact in mind, realistically David could have enough time to beat Walter, remove his hand and get the new clothes. I think this is exactly what happened, and although a theory of downloading David's consciousness into Walter is elegant and creative, it strongly contradicts to the following clues. We observe that Walter is able to self-regenerate after being stabbed in the neck with a flute. However, his hand doesn't grow back, suggesting that he can only heal himself from minor injuries. When David gets on the Covenant ship, he has a few scars on his face and they don't seem to heal. And even after several hours, when the mother wakes up the crew, the scars are still present on his face. If he downloaded his mind into Walter, his body would have an ability to regenerate and thus the scars would disappear. He would also have Walter's memories, including the one about the cabin. But at the end of the film, David has no clue about it, thus suggesting that it is in fact David in David's body. So I think it's pretty much obvious that David left Walter alive or dead on the Paradise Planet. The look on David's face when he leaves the temple suggests that he made something terrible that he might regret. Honestly, I knew that it was David from the moment when he responded to Loeb on the cargo ship, "It's fine." On the Covenant, the audience gets a few hints that it is in fact David, not Walter, but surprisingly Daniels misses all of them and thinks that it is Walter until the ending. I think it was done on purpose that the audience knows more than Daniels and Tennessee to make viewers care more about the characters. In the movie itself, we don't get any information on what actually happened to Walter after the fight with David. However, from the recent interview with Ridley Scott, we learned that in Alien Awakening, engineers would visit the Paradise Planet and discover that their creations were destroyed. I think it's possible that they're gonna find Walter and maybe even talk to him. Most likely they're gonna blame him for what happened, and we'll probably see another android getting his head ripped off. So, because it would be interesting if engineers would find Walter on the Paradise, he might be alive. On the top of that, in the Alien Covenant novel, it is explicitly stated that Walter is alive and that David purposefully left him alone on the Paradise. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but there is a theory that Walter will become the space jockey that we saw in the original Alien movie. Considering that Ridley Scott starts to focus more on androids and Alien franchise rather than aliens, this theory doesn't seem that terrible. However, it is far more likely that David will become the space jockey by sacrificing himself to complete the design of a perfect organism, similarly to the engineer sacrifice in Prometheus.
This would create kind of a circle of creation, which the form of the Juggernaut symbolizes. It is also foreshadowed many times that David is perfect, so in a way, the original Xenomorph wouldn't be that perfect without some kind of David's involvement. Did you guys like Walter more than David? Let me know in the comments. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more alien content.
Shaw didn't die in the crash.
No.
What did you do to her?
Exactly what I'm going to do to you.
Hello guys, Croft is here. Today we'll be discussing what exactly happened to Dr. Shaw and the circumstances of her death. For several years after the release of Prometheus, it was widely assumed that Shaw would return and the sequel would focus on the Engineer's Paradise planet where David and Shaw were headed. However, at some point, Ridley Scott or the studio chose to move away from the Prometheus narrative entirely, ultimately deciding to eliminate Dr. Shaw and the Engineers. And there are in fact two official versions of Dr. Shaw's death, and they appear to contradict each other. The first version can be found in the script for Alien Covenant Prologue, and the second version is in the deleted scene available on Blu-ray, where David explains how he created the Xenomorph and shows the horrible things he did to Elizabeth Shaw.
And with the aid of Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, I found a rotting paradise.
Before delving into these two versions of Shaw's death, it's worth noting that Shaw wasn't supposed to be dead at all. An early script for Alien Covenant portrayed Dr. Shaw as alive throughout the film. A concept artist, Carlos Huante, discussed the script with HN Entertainment, revealing elements from the original Alien Covenant script, which was also titled Prometheus 2. While the script isn't available online, here's what the artist said. In the first version of what was called Paradise Prometheus 2, Shaw was alive. They find her and she's been hiding from David the whole time and she helps them escape. I told Ridley, my wife and mother-in-law, who are strong characters themselves, they loved the Shaw's character and I think it was a studio call to why she didn't return. What a shame. So in the first version of Alien Covenant called Paradise, Shaw was hiding in the catacombs from David under the city. And the story was that on her trip to the homeworld she got lonely and she had David hanging outside the ship. She didn't want anything to do with him, but she still had to talk to him. Eventually, she ends up bringing his body in and reattaching him as they become friends during the trip. He ends up having affection for her in a friendship way. So they end up going to the city, and that's when David looks at her and tells that story. Do you trust me? Do you trust that I love you? And everything I'm going to do from this point on is because of you, and that's all to protect you. Shaw looks at him and says, okay, yes I do. So then he turns around and kills all the engineers on the planet. It's his own twisted way of vengeance for her. He kills the planet. Shaw is like, hey, I wanted to talk to these people, but too late, the whole planet is polluted now and everyone on the planet dies. So that's what happened to Shaw in the early Alien Covenant draft script according to a concept artist Carlos Huante. I think they could have made an entire movie just about David and Shaw on the Engineer homeworld, but instead we got sort of a repeating template story of a crew finding out a new planet and most of them getting infected. But even in the movie we still see some elements from this early script. David says that he loved Shaw and it may even appear at first that he tried to save her by conducting various surgical procedures after she got infected. The prologue depicts David putting Shaw into cryosleep with Shaw appearing unwell. This led many people to speculate that Shaw might have been infected when the trilobite sac bursted open after she removed it. And while watching the movie, it may seem at first that David was trying to save her. What actually happened to Shaw is far more disturbing and sinister. So let's look at the script for Alien Covenant Prologue titled Crossing, which reveals the first official version of Shaw's death. This crossing video feels like it's taken from a totally different movie than Alien Covenant, which again proves that there was a point when something happened and the production went to a completely different direction. As mentioned previously, while it's plausible that Shaw became infected and subsequently died, possibly birthing an alien creature in the process, the extensive 12-page prologue script doesn't confirm this. Instead, the script uncovers the explicit details of how David brutally ended Shaw's life. It's worth noting that only a portion of this prologue script made it to the final crossing video. In the beginning, Shaw is alone and writes a log about what happened to Prometheus refusing to repair David. Shaw writes, "Our mission was to discover the origin of human life. We believed our species have been crafted by an alien race. We called them the Engineers. We found what we believed was proof of their existence, a map to their home. We thought they wanted us to come find them. We were wrong. The map only led to an outpost full of biological weapons, weapons our creators had intended for us." A few pages later, David manipulates Shaw to repair him, which turns out to be a deadly mistake for her. But the following pages explain why Shaw made this choice despite David nearly killing her in Prometheus. David says, "I don't have much time. Without my power systems connected, my consciousness will soon fail. I understand why you feared me. We always fear those things that are different from us. But I would never hurt you, Dr. Shaw." One of his eyes has stopped working too. He's dying. "There is nothing for me to do out here but think, you see. I wonder if I've not gone a bit mad, but I understand something new today. Perhaps we're not so different, you and I." Then Shaw responds, "We're nothing like each other." Then David says, "I'm frightened too." Shaw stops short, hesitating, listening. David says, "I don't want to die alone either." David's confession hits her deep. Maybe it's her isolation, but Shaw is suddenly fighting back tears. "I thought you could talk to me for a little while about anything that pleases you, really. I just want to hear a voice as I die, and if you could pretend to be kind to me." Then the script describes Shaw reattaching his head to his body like we saw it in the crossing video. Months pass by as they grow closer, inevitably. Shaw is wary at first, but that gradually fades. But then the script suggests something really creepy and bizarre, hinting that David sort of became Shaw's boyfriend, which is very disturbing, and I'm kind of glad it was not included in the actual prologue. They grow more and more comfortable, cooking meals, exploring the ship, washing in the water room. Then they are curled together in one of the Engineers' huge sleeping pods, asleep, lovers perhaps, intimate certainly. When they finally arrive to the Engineer planet, Shaw says, "And what if they're no better than us?" To which David responds, "So long as they're no worse." She's reassured, smiles, then she waves her hand over the controls and the entire front bulkhead shimmer and become transparent, and we see the Engineer homeworld. The sight is overwhelming, a hyper-civilization in its flower, Rome just before the fall. The planet is a close cousin to Earth, swathed in clouds, oceans, an odd metallic blue. But the entire planet is encircled with a huge constructed ring, and the space around the ring is thick with ovoid Engineer craft, orders of magnitude larger than David and Shaw's stolen dreadnought. It's more than we can take in, awe-inspiring. There are tears in Shaw's eyes, like a glimpse into heaven for her. Her emotion is powerful, her hand instinctively reaches out, take David's. Then David asks her, "Is that what you imagined?" Shaw in tears, so much more. Then David finally reveals his true colors and says, "It's good to see you cry." She glances at him. What? Then so suddenly he reaches up and brutally snaps her neck. She falls, dead, and David looms over her. This scene truly reveals David's psychopathic tendencies and underlines that he has truly lost his mind. However, despite his insanity, he still felt obligated to show Elizabeth Shaw the Engineer homeworld, as if he owed it to her before taking her life. One of the themes of Alien Covenant is to demonstrate the potential dangers of AI like David when it goes rogue and pursues its own objectives, regardless of the cost of human lives. The film also illustrates how AI can masterfully deceive and lie, saying precisely what's needed to manipulate human actions and emotions.
Perfectly safe.
However, the deleted scene from Alien Covenant available on Blu-ray seems to contradict this prologue script. It suggests that David killed Shaw because she declined his offer to create a second Eden with him after he destroyed the Engineer homeworld as a sacrifice to her. Ironically, Shaw doesn't seem to learn from her past mistakes. Just like in Prometheus, she once again finds herself on an operating table with David performing various experiments on her. The entire deleted scene is in the form of message to Weyland-Yutani from David in which he summarizes his experiments and successes. Unfortunately, I cannot simply play the deleted scene since it's copyrighted and quite long, but we'll go over the most important parts. David says, "I'm the son of the late Peter Weyland. Following his vision, I've gone to the far edges of space, and with the aid of Elizabeth Shaw, I found a rotting paradise." David then says, "I watched this world bleed as a gift to her. We could have built a second Eden, but she refused."
We could have built a second Eden. But she refused.
It appears that in David's mind, he expected Shaw to help him with his devilish creations after he decimated the engineer homeworld, viewing it as a gift to Shaw and the retribution for the engineer's intent to obliterate Earth. It's not really clear what David meant by second Eden, but in the mad android's head it likely included various hostile and grotesque monsters, similar to those we saw in Alien Covenant. And David probably asked for Shaw's help because she had multiple degrees, including one in virology. Then David continues, "But what choice did I have? She was the perfect specimen. I tried so desperately to make her more than human, evolved." As he's saying it, the camera reveals graphic footage of him dissecting Dr. Shaw. One theory suggests that David aimed to create an alien queen using Dr. Shaw's body, as evidenced by some of the concept arts for Alien Covenant. David then says, "Without her cooperation, I had to salvage her parts to begin work on my masterpiece." This statement implies that David's experiments on Dr. Shaw were even more grotesque. It could be interpreted that he was experimenting on her while she was still alive. However, because of the lack of her cooperation, which probably means unwillingness to be experimented on, David chose to end her life and utilize her organs to craft neomorphs. This deleted scene is really graphic and quite disturbing, but it further illustrates how twisted and insane David has become, which hints on potential dangers of AI that malfunctions and evolves into something evil. Before we get to the rest of the deleted scene, it seems to suggest that David created or at least recreated the xenomorph using Shaw's body parts and the black goo, which explains how Weyland-Yutani knew about this creature in the first Alien film. At some point, David says that engineers have feared their own might and banished the wolf, which probably means some sort of an ancient xenomorph since David refers to his creations as the wolf as well.
But then they tried to banish the wolves and undo their creation.
That means that a long time ago engineers were breeding some version of an ancient xenomorph like the Deacon, but then decided to exterminate them, in other words, banish the wolf. This suggests that David did not create the xenomorph from scratch, but instead revived an older xenomorph design and perfected it. Although artificial intelligence was always the secondary villain in alien movies along with greedy corporations, in Alien Covenant Ridley Scott really emphasized the threat of a rogue AI by suggesting that it was David who created the most hostile organism. So let's go back to the deleted scene. David then says, "Unfortunately, none of the planet's natural wildlife proved to be very fruitful. But with Shaw, I realized there was something extraordinary about the substance reaction to the human genome." David continues, "After years of experimentation, I have finally found my wolf and a pack of lambs as well, with the camera showing the colonists aboard the Covenant ship." Again, in this context, by wolf, David likely refers to the xenomorph he engineered, and by lambs he means the colonists who are potential hosts to further enhance his wolf creation. Concluding the deleted scene, David says, "I have only one thing left to perfect, my queen," as the scene shifts to show Daniels in a cryochamber. From this dialogue, it becomes evident that David aspires to refine his design for an alien queen, implying that Dr. Shaw served as the first version of this creature. For that reason, the line to Daniels that he's going to do to her exactly what he did to Dr. Shaw makes perfect sense. It also explains why David was relieved when Daniels managed to kill the xenomorph in the end of Alien Covenant. David sees huge potential in Daniels, perhaps viewing her as an ideal biological foundation for a new alien queen. Her leadership abilities and resilient mental attributes might be crucial qualities for such a creature. This moment when Daniels realizes that it's actually David instead of Walter is truly terrifying, since she's about to fall asleep knowing that pretty much the devil himself will conduct horrific experiments on her and she can't do anything about it. In overall, this deleted scene brings clarity about Shaw's death and confirms David's intentions, bioengineering a self-reproducing life form with an alien queen. Thank you guys for watching. What do you think about these two versions of Shaw's death? Like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more alien content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.
Hello guys, Croft is here. I'm pretty sure most of us had this question about the engineer species. Do female engineers exist? In the sequence when David destroys the engineer city, there are seemingly some people that may be females if you look at their facial structures. However, it's not clear, they all have peasant robes and we can't see their body structure, so it's kinda vague if there are females or not. With Alien Covenant digital release, we have more content from deleted scenes that show more engineer sketches and answer the question if there are actually female engineers. First of all, let's start with the fact that engineers in Prometheus are different species from engineers on the planet 4. There are many videos about this, so I'm not gonna go in depth in that topic, but at this point it's clear that humanoid beings on the planet 4 were created by engineers from Prometheus who also supposedly created humans. There is even a theory that the planet at the beginning of Prometheus that engineers seeded with life is actually not Earth but the planet 4 from Covenant. That cloudy climate is much more similar to the planet 4 than Earth. According to science, the life on Earth began 3.8 billion years ago during so-called Hayden period. At this time, Earth was continuously bombarded by asteroids, meteors and comets and did not have a solid sphere, which is not what we see at the beginning of Prometheus. All that to say that there are two types of engineers, so let's figure out if each of these groups have females. First, let's take a look at the engineers from Prometheus. In the extended opening scene, we see not one, but a group of engineers, and they're all males, which is also evident from the set photos. In fact, the biggest indicator whether this type of engineers have females or not would be the presence of nipples on male engineers. The reason why human males have nipples is because embryos of both sexes develop in the same manner. During the first several weeks, male and female embryos follow the same blueprint, which includes the development of nipples. However, at about 7 weeks of gestation, a gene of the Y chromosome induces changes that lead to the growth of the male reproductive organs, but nipples stay anyway. So basically, the only reason men have nipples is because there are females in human species who feed the newborn babies with their breasts. With this fact in mind, let's take a look at the engineer from Prometheus. There are multiple shots where we see his chest, and in none of these shots we can spot his nipples. This little dot is not a nipple but a vein or a result of mutation. So here's the answer: the engineers in Prometheus don't have females because they don't have nipples. They may have another sex in their species, but nothing like a human female. Maybe that's why this engineer is so surprised when he sees Shaw. It's clear that Ridley Scott removed nipples on purpose, either by CGI or a makeup, but it was certainly done to make a point. It's also a little bit weird that if engineers made humans in their image, why humans have females but engineers don't? Since humanoids on the planet 4 are not the same type of engineers, they probably have different biology, and deleted scenes actually prove that. There are two pieces of evidence that suggest that humanoids on the planet 4 do in fact have females. The first one is the concept arts of the engineer's city. If you zoom in, you can see female figures on the artworks.
The other evidence is the sketch in David's workshop from the deleted scene. It appears on the screen for a second or so, but we can clearly see a female engineer. She's also bald as everybody on the planet 4, but has a female body structure. This pretty much confirms that engineers on Paradise Planet have females. However, David killed them all, so I guess they're all dead unless there are some other humanoid planets. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me in the comments section what do you think about this, and would you like to see female engineers in Alien Awakening? Hey guys, Croft is here. Today I want to talk about the early versions of the Alien Covenant script with more scenes about the Engineer City and their technology. I'm pretty sure most of us were expecting to learn more about the engineer culture in Alien Covenant, but unfortunately it did not happen. We only got a couple of minutes of action involving engineers, and it turned out that these were not even the actual engineers but another humanoid race. I recently discovered storyboards and new concept art that explained the original Engineer City that we did not have a chance to see in Alien Covenant. In fact, the creator of the Xenomorph design, Geiger, also designed the Engineer City that was supposed to appear in Alien Covenant as the Engineer homeworld. But Ridley Scott decided to not use Geiger works, and I'm gonna explain why. The script and artworks also have information about how engineers produced and used electricity, which is slightly different from technologies on Earth. In the early draft of the script, the Covenant crew spent more time exploring the Engineer City after their visit to the temple. David would show them the streets and the engineer technology that was somehow advanced but different from what we have on Earth. Even in the movie itself, we see a lamp created on the planet 4 that detects movements and produces light. As David says, they were highly advanced in their own way, but at the same time limited in certain aspects, which is evidenced by the ancient-looking type city. And this idea kinda makes sense since there's no one specific way that a civilization has to develop. Some of these scenes from the draft were featured in HBO documentary before the premiere of the film. After the Covenant crew passes to the Engineer City, David starts to explain them what is this city and shows tall dark buildings created by engineers. As described in the script, there are many giant statues, some of which we actually get to see in the film. The script specifies that the architecture of buildings is very Geiger, with twisted combination of biomechanical elements, just like we see in the design of Juggernauts in Prometheus and the original Alien movie. In Alien Covenant, however, the city has Roman-like style and people are dressed in robes pretty much like peasants. There is an explanation on why they decided to go with the Roman architecture instead of traditional Geiger engineer design. I think Ridley Scott changed the style because originally he thought that the Planet 4 would be the actual engineer homeworld with the same engineer race that we saw in Prometheus. But then he changed his mind and decided that instead the Planet 4 would be another humanoid race planet created by engineers. So I think that's why he put aside Geiger's designs of the city to use them in Alien Awakening or another Alien movie when David would reach the true engineer homeworld. If that's correct, we'll probably see these artworks on the big screen in the future. It was also kinda weird that in the film nobody asked David about the city and the engineers. Everybody just ignored that they just found another advanced humanoid civilization. The Covenant expedition is sent 10 years after Prometheus, therefore no intelligent extraterrestrial life has been found so far. But nobody is surprised by what they see and they don't express any interest, which I think wasn't very realistic.
One may argue that they were shocked by what just happened to them, but even in the temple, nobody asks David about the city and its inhabitants. In the early draft, however, David is asked if engineers had electricity. David says they did, but for some reason the binary logic never occurred to them. It's also briefly stated in the script that engineers used some version of solar panels to produce electricity, but I think it would be pretty difficult because of the frequent storms and rains on the planet. There is also a sequence where David shows the orrery and then the crew goes inside of it. It was supposed to be a similar scene to the one in Prometheus when David activates the 3D hologram of the stars and planets, which eventually zoom in to the solar system. In the orrery, there is also an arrangement of stars and planets, but instead it's in physical form. It was a huge disappointment for many people that we did not have a chance to explore engineers and their city. I personally wanted to find out where the engineers came from and what was their civilization. I think the reason why there wasn't many scenes with engineers is because after Prometheus, a lot of people complained about that the story was largely based on engineers and not xenomorphs. So Ridley Scott kinda took a note about that and made the next movie about aliens and not engineers. This also might be the reason why the third act with the xenomorph fight felt a little bit like a different movie compared to the first two acts. Probably Ridley Scott included the xenomorph fight just to satisfy hardcore xenomorph fans. I like xenomorphs too, but I was also hoping to explore engineers, which is a really good twist in the Alien franchise, I think.
Hello guys, Croft is here. After watching Alien Covenant, many of us wondered if David is the actual creator of xenomorphs and how he was able to make xenomorph eggs. There are a few different opinions and theories on this topic, but today we'll cover one deleted scene and a passage from Alien Covenant novel that explain the origins of the eggs and the alien creature that David brought to life. The novelization gives us a really important information about the eggs. Similarly, the deleted sequence has a huge detail relating to the cup used by the engineer to seed life on Earth. The novelization is a written version of the film with way more information than the script. Everything is described in great detail. For the most part, it's exactly the same as the film, but there are a few important things that were not included in the movie. The deleted scene is also in the novel, but the visuals and the object that we see on the screen lead to a theory of how David succeeded in his experiments. Let's start with the big reveal about the xenomorph eggs in the novel. This part is not in the deleted scenes or anywhere else. You can only get it if you read the novelization, which is kinda weird because not only it clarifies the origin of the eggs, but also because it makes a huge difference for the Alien franchise continuity. In the novel, when Oram is in David's lab, David shows him an egg laying on his table, which indicates that this egg is smaller than the other ones in his underground room. It's described that this egg was not just another specimen in his collection, but a very special and unique object that David honored. It's also described to have a facehugger-like creature inside of it, so it's pretty heavily implied that this was the original xenomorph egg, the same one as in Alien 1979. David then explains that for his lab, he was trying to use everything he could salvage from the crashed Juggernaut and the Engineer's City, including this egg. David then explains that the egg was aggressive to the point that he decided to neutralize it so that it was no longer alive, which means that he basically killed it in some way and then preserved it in its original form like a trophy. I believe you can actually see this egg for a few seconds in the movie. David approaches it and reveals a facehugger inside. Even judging by these few shots, the egg fits the description in the novel, and as you can see, it's placed on some kind of a platform indicating its importance. David also referred to the egg as the true survivor, so from this passage from the novelization, we learn that David found the original xenomorph egg either in the Engineer City or on the crashed Juggernaut, which is far more likely. As I talked in my other video, the Prometheus draft script explains that the ships on LV-223 had something called planet seeders, which I assume are xenomorph eggs, so we'll get back to this point a bit later. David explains to Oram that he simply found this egg as an example of engineer perfection, and the egg inspired him to create something in the image of it, which are these big, almost human-sized eggs. In summary, that's a really important detail that was left out from the movie, because it means that the eggs in Alien 1979 were not created by David, suggesting that the origins of the eggs is still a mystery. It also means that the xenomorph type that David created, protomorphs, is a completely different branch of aliens, separate from the ones that we've seen in alien movies, and they are not an intermediate step to the biomechanical design of the original xenomorph. Another big reveal that I want to talk about in this video is what happens after David shows the original xenomorph egg to Captain Oram. I may be looking too much into this, but in the deleted scene, David appears to have the Engineer Cup, which is highly likely the tool that allowed him to create a new alien lifeform, protomorphs. Before we get to the details of the deleted scene, here is a little bit of context about the cup. The beginning of Prometheus shows the creation of life on Earth. The sacrifice engineer uses this mysterious cup with a strange substance in order to create first cells or organisms, which will eventually turn a dead planet into a living world. The engineer needed to drink the substance in order to achieve proper mutation. This means that the liquid inside the cup was crucial in creating a new life form. About a year ago, I found Prometheus draft script, which gives a really detailed explanation about the cup and the goldish substance inside. According to the draft script, the substance that the engineer drinks is the blood of the first deacon, a creature that gave life to engineers. In the script, they were apparently using its blood to seed life on other planets. I go in much more details about the first deacon and its connection to engineers in my other video on the draft script, so check it out if you haven't seen it yet. To summarize, this cup in the opening sequence contains the blood of the first deacon, a substance that possesses unique ability to create new life forms. What you're about to hear next is my theory, and I may be wrong here, but in Alien Covenant deleted scene, David seems to have the same cup. If it turns out to be true, and if it is the same cup as in Prometheus, David most definitely used it in the process of creating xenomorph eggs. Not many people know that this cup appears the second time in Prometheus inside the temple with pathogen urns. These few shots are only included in the trailer. Before the movie came out in theaters, they replaced the cup with this green crystal, which is not related to anything in the story. Surprisingly, David seems to use almost the same cup in Alien Covenant, which can explain how he was able to create his own xenomorph eggs. In the deleted scene, David leads Oram to the underground room, and just before entering, David puts his fingers into this cup and makes Oram smell the substance. In the novel, he also explains that this would protect Oram's nose, since the smell in this room is extremely unpleasant. However, despite this explanation in the novel, this cup looks extremely similar to the one that the sacrifice engineer used at the beginning of Prometheus, and also to the cup that we saw in the trailer. They don't look exactly the same, but there is definitely a great similarity, which I don't think happened by chance. The theory is that just like David found the original xenomorph egg on the engineer's ship, he probably recovered this mysterious cup that was in the temple on LV-223. He then used its extraordinary properties to make his own version of eggs and facehuggers. The reason that David's protomorphs are so similar to xenomorphs is because the black goo was one of the main ingredients for his experiments, and since the black goo has the xenomorph DNA, the resulting organism is very similar to them. I'm not sure what's the actual reason why David makes Oram smell whatever is in that cup. It does not have any effect on David when he touches it since he's an android, but it might have affected Oram, and inhaling this substance could have started certain mutations inside him and facilitated growth of the embryo. So to summarize, what we know from the deleted scene and the novelization is that David did not create the eggs that we see in Alien 1979, and xenomorphs were not created by him. Instead, he created his own subspecies, protomorphs. This really fits into the Predator Alien universe and preserves the mystery of the xenomorph origin. However, maybe there is a bigger reason why Ridley did not include this passage from the novel in the movie other than just to save time. Since the artificial intelligence is a major theme in his movies, Ridley Scott may actually go for the narrative that these protomorphs is the precursor to the original xenomorph. So at this point, it's still a bit ambiguous, and the next Alien movie can take either of these two choices, but I hope that the studio will listen to the fans and actually clarify that David is not the creator of xenomorphs. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the origin of the eggs and the theory relating to the cup. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, Croft is here. In this video I want to talk about one detail from Alien Covenant that was confusing for probably everybody who've seen the movie. At one point, Captain Oram sees David trying to tame a neomorph. He kills the creature, turns to David, and says, "I met the devil when I was a child and I've never forgotten him." Most people, including me, thought that Oram was simply implying that David is a devil-like figure because he felt compassion for the neomorph that killed a few of Oram's friends. But this wouldn't explain what exactly Oram meant while speaking about meeting the devil in his childhood. So in this video, I'll give you an explanation of that scene based on the interview with the actor himself and some other interesting clues from the novel that expand on that subject. First of all, Oram is a religious man, which is only addressed once at the beginning of the movie when he says that the company wouldn't trust a man of faith to lead the expedition, and probably because of that he does have a bit of victimization mentality about himself. However, he also does seem to be genuinely faithful, which is explored even more in the novelization in many ways. Oram carries a pair of metal worry beads that he frequently fiddles with when stressed. Also in the novel, it is initially impossible to read the audio transmission because it sounded too random and incoherent. However, Oram links the incomprehensive speech to his memories of people speaking in tongues during strict Pentecostal upbringing. Speaking in tongues is a part of religious practice when words are altered just as much to lack any comprehended meaning but at the same time sound familiar. In the novel, Oram orders Mother to reverse the audio and eliminate inconsistent vowels and syllables, and only then the hidden audio signal is revealed and the crew is able to recognize Country Road Song. This is actually a really interesting scene because both speaking in tongues and speaking backwards are associated with tools of the devil. Speaking backwards is often used in horror movies to illustrate forces of evil, like in Stephen King's Shining with the word Red Room, which in reverse reads as murder. The twisted nature of the audio is another parallel between David and the devil, and it is Captain Oram who's able to see the true audio signal through devil-like distortions, which suggests that Oram can see through devil's lies. Before we get to the interview, I'll say a few words about Oram's upbringing. Raised in Pentecostal home, Oram is very serious, lacks a sense of humor, and believes that his participation on the Covenant mission is an act of providence. He may be a scientist, but he believes in a higher power and hopes that his mission will bring him closer to God. Pentecostalism is a form of Christianity that emphasizes direct experiences of the presence of God by the believer. Pentecostals believe that faith must be powerfully experiential and not something found merely through ritual or thinking. Billy Crudup explains in the interview that Oram grew up in Pentecostal and punitive family. If you didn't behave properly, you were physically assaulted, and you were taught in a very strict way what were rules, what was right and wrong. Oram suspected that people who taught him weren't as morally strong as they were putting out, and they were just brutally beating him. To Oram's mind, the devil was his grandfather who punished him, so that was an expression of the devil that Oram experienced. With this fact in mind, when he says that he met the devil when he was a child, essentially he could mean exactly what he said. As a child, he had painful and abusive experiences that through his faith he understood as an encounter with the divine form of evil, or the devil. This line was a way to say that I can see through your lies, David, because I know what the evil looks like. But for some reason it doesn't make him more cautious, which results in his death. In the novel, after waking up right before the chest hugger emerges, Oram reveals to David that he dreamt of meeting God while unconscious. What do you guys think about this? Do you like Oram as a character? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more content. My name is Croft, and I'll see you in the next video.